The world has been on fast forward because the speed of the events and the enormity of the challenges are sometimes very difficult to grasp. And this has also been a time of soul searching. People are re-evaluating their own lives. We are having wider debates on shared vaccines and shared values. But as I look back on this past year, and if I look at the State of the Union today, I see a strong soul in everything what we do. It was Robert Schuman who said, Europe needs a soul, an ideal, and the political will to serve this ideal. And Europe has brought those words to life in the last 12 months. In the biggest global health crisis for a century, we chose to go it together so that every part of Europe had access to the life-saving vaccines. In the deepest global economic crisis for decades, we chose to go it together with Next Generation EU. And in the gravest planetary crisis of all time, again, we chose to go it together with the European Green Deal. We did it together as a Commission, and I thank from the bottom of my heart my outstanding College of Commissioners for the enormous support during that time. We did it together as a Parliament with 27 member states, as one Europe, and I think we can be proud of it. But Corona times are not over, and there is still much grief in our society as the pandemic lingers. There are hearts we can never mend, life stories we can never finish, and time we can never give back to our young. We face new and enduring challenges in a world recovering and fracturing unevenly. So there is no question the next year will be another test of character. But I believe it is when you are tested that your spirit, your soul truly shines through. And as I look across our union, I know that Europe will pass the test. And what gives me that confidence is the inspiration we can draw from Europe's young people. Because our youth put meaning into empathy and solidarity. They believe we have a responsibility towards the planet. And while they are anxious about the future, they are determined to make it better. Our union will be stronger if it is more like our next generation, reflective, determined, and caring, grounded in values and bold in action. And this spirit will be more important than ever over the next 12 months. This is the message in the letter of intent I sent this morning to President Sassoli and Prime Minister Janša to outline our priorities for the year ahead. Honourable members, a year is long in the time of pandemics. When I stood here in front of you 12 months ago, I did not know when or even if we could have a safe and effective vaccine against COVID-19. But today, against all critics, Europe is among the world leaders. More than 70% of our adult population is fully vaccinated. We were the only ones to share half of our vaccine production with the rest of the world. We delivered more than 700 million doses of vaccines to the Europeans. We delivered Indeed, we delivered also more than 700 million to the rest of the world, to more than 130 countries. And we are the only region in the world to achieve that. Honourable members, a pandemic is a marathon, it's not a sprint. We followed the science, we delivered to Europe, we delivered to the rest of the world, We did it the right way because we did it the European way, and I think it worked. But while we have every reason to be confident, we have no reason to be complacent. Our first and most urgent priority is to speed up global vaccination. With less than 1% of global doses administered in low-income countries, the scale of injustice and the level of urgency is obvious. This is one of the great geopolitical issues in our time. Team Europe is investing €1 billion to ramp up mRNA production capacity with Africa. We have already committed to share 250 million doses of vaccine. I can announce today that the Commission will add a new donation of another 200 million doses until the middle of next year. This is an investment in solidarity, and it is an investment also in global health. The second priority is to continue our efforts here in Europe. We see worrisome divergences between member states what vaccination rates are concerned. So we need to keep up the momentum. And Europe is ready. We have 1.8 billion additional doses secured. This is enough for us and our neighborhood when booster shots are needed. So let's do everything possible that this does not turn into a pandemic of the unvaccinated. And my third point, the final priority, is to strengthen our pandemic preparedness. Last year, I said it was time to build a European health union. Today, we are delivering. With our proposal, we get the HERA authority up and running. This will be a huge asset to deal with future health threats earlier and better. We have the innovation and scientific capacity. We have the private sector knowledge. We have competent national authorities. And now we have to bring all that together, including massive funding. So I am proposing a new health preparedness and resilience mission for the whole of the European Union. And it should be backed up by Team Europe investment of 50 billion by 2027 to make sure that no virus will ever turn a local epidemic again in a global pandemic. There is no better return on investment than that. Honourable members, the work on the European Health Union is a big step forward. And I want to thank this House for your support. We have shown that when we act together, we can act fast. Take the EU digital certificate. Today, more than 400 million certificates have been generated across Europe. 42 countries in 4 different continents are plugged in. We proposed it in March. You pushed hard. You helped enormously. 3 months later only, it was up and running. So while the rest of the world was talking about, Europe just did it. And we did a lot of things right. We moved fast to create SURE. This supported over 31 million workers and 2.5 million companies across Europe. We learned the lessons from the past when we were too divided and too delayed. And the difference is stark. Last time, it took us 8 years for the Eurozone GDP to get back to pre-crisis level. This time, we expect 19 countries to be at pre-pandemic levels this year, with the rest following next. Growth in the euro area outpaced both the US and China in the last quarter. But this is only the beginning, and the lessons from the financial crisis could serve as a cautionary tale. At that time, Europe declared victory too soon, and we paid the price for that. And we will not repeat that mistake. The good news is that with Next Generation EU, we will both invest in short-term recovery and in the long-term prosperity. We will address structural issues in our economy, from labour market reforms in Spain to pension reforms in Slovenia or to tax reforms in Austria, for example. In an unprecedented manner, we will invest in 5G and fibre. But equally important is the investment in digital skills. This is such an important topic. This task needs leaders' attention, and it needs a structured dialogue at top level. We really have to emphasize that and put a strong focus on it. Our response provides a clear direction to market and investors alike. But as we look ahead, we also need to reflect on how the crisis has affected the shape of our economy, from increased debts to uneven impact on different sectors, or new ways of working. And to do that, the Commission will relaunch the discussion on the economic governance review in the coming weeks. The aim is to build a consensus on the way forward well ahead of 2023. Honourable members, we will soon celebrate 30 years of single market. For 30 years, it has been the great enabler of progress and prosperity in Europe. At the outset of the pandemic, we had to defend it against the pressures of erosion and fragmentation. For our recovery, the single market is the driver of good jobs and competitiveness. And that is particularly important in the digital single market. We have made ambitious proposals in the last year, for example, to contain the gatekeeper power of the major platforms, to underpin their democratic responsibilities of those platforms, to foster innovation, to channel the power of artificial intelligence. Digital is the make or break issue. And member states also share that view. For example, if you look at the digital spending in Next Generation EU, and you know we have a 20% target, we will even overshoot that 20% target. That is good. That reflects the importance of investing in our European tech sovereignty. But allow me to focus on semiconductors for a moment, these tiny chips that make everything work, from smartphones to electric scooters, from trains to entire smart factories. There is no digital without those chips. And while we speak, whole production lines are already working at reduced speed, despite growing demand, because of a shortage of semiconductors. And while global demand has exploded, Europe's share across the entire value chain, from the design or manufacturing capacities, has shrunk. We depend right now on state-of-the-art chips manufactured by Asia. So this is not just a matter of our competitiveness. This is also a matter of tech sovereignty. So let's put all our forces in it to improve this situation. We will present a new European Chips Act. We need to link together our world-class research, design and testing capacities. We need to coordinate the European level and the national investment along the value chain. And the aim is to jointly create a state-of-the-art European chip ecosystem, including production, that ensures our security of supply and will develop new markets for groundbreaking European tech. And yes, I know this is a daunting task, without any question. It's a big, big goal that I put out there. And I know there are some now that claim it cannot be done. But they have said the same 20 years ago about Galileo. And now look where we are. We got our act together. Today, Europe's satellite provides the navigation system for more than 2 billion smartphones worldwide. So we did it once. We are world leaders in Galileo now. Let's be bold again, and let's focus all our forces on the semiconductors, and let's go and be a world leader again. This should be our aim. Mesdames et Messieurs les députés,
ladies and gentlemen, honourable members,
la pandémie a laissé de
the
profondes
pandemic
cicatrices,
has left deep scars
énormément notre économie sociale de
with an
marché.
enormous impact on our social
Soir
market
après
economy.
soir, nous étions
Evening
tous là,
after evening,
à nos fenêtres, devant
we
nos
all
portes,
stood at
pour
our
applaudir
windows,
les
in our
travailleurs de
doorways, to
première
applaud
ligne.
the work of the
Nous avons
frontline
tous
workers.
senti combien nous
We
dépendions de ces
all
travailleurs.
felt how much we depended on
celles
their
et ceux
work, how much we
qui se
depended on the
dévouent
work of
pour un
those men
salaire
and women who
inférieur, moins de protection,
devote
moins
their
de
efforts on a low salary with
Les applaudissements se sont peut-être estompés,
insecure jobs
mais la force de nos
to our
émotions
health. So the applause might have died down, but I think the force of our
C'est pourquoi la
appreciation
mise en
should
œuvre du
continue.
socle européen
And
des
that
droits
is why
sociaux
the
est si
implementation of the
importante.
European Pillar of Social Rights is so
Il s'agit
important.
d'emplois décents,
We are talking about decent
de
work,
conditions de travail justes,
creating fair
de soins de
working
santé
conditions,
meilleurs
better
et d'un
health
bon
care,
équilibre de vie.
and striking
Si
the
la
right
pandémie nous a appris
work-life
une
balance.
chose,
If
c'est
the
bien
pandemic has taught us
la
one
valeur
thing,
du temps.
it is the value of our
et
time.
qu'il n'y a point de temps aussi précieux
And there is no
que le
time
temps
more precious
consacré à nos
than the
proches.
time we spend
C'est
with those
ainsi
close to us,
que nous
with
proposerons
our
une
friends and
nouvelle
family.
stratégie
So this is
européenne
why
de
we are
soins.
promoting a new European
Afin que
health
chaque homme et
strategy,
chaque femme
healthcare strategy,
puisse
to ensure
bénéficier
that every man and
des meilleurs
woman
soins
can
possibles
benefit from the best
et
possible
trouver la meilleure
care
équilibre de vie.
and find the right work-life
Mais,
balance.
mesdames et messieurs, l'équité
But
sociale
ladies and gentlemen,
n'est pas seulement
social
une question de
justice
temps.
is not just a question
Elle
of
est également
time.
une question
It is
d'équité
also a
fiscale.
question of tax
Dans notre
fairness.
économie sociale de marché, il est bon
In
que
our
les entreprises
social market
réalisent
economy,
des
it is a
profits.
good thing for
Mais si elles
businesses
réalisent
to
des
make profits. But
c'est
if
bien
they
grâce
make
à la
profits,
qualité de nos
it is
infrastructures,
thanks to the quality of our
de notre
infrastructure,
sécurité sociale,
of our social
de nos
security
systèmes
systems,
éducatifs.
of our education
Alors,
systems.
C'est la moindre des choses
So,
qu'elles payent
the
leur
least that we can expect
contribution.
is that the businesses should make their fair contribution.
Et c'est pourquoi nous continuerons
And
à
that
lutter
is why
contre
we will
l'évasion et la
continue to
fraude
fight
fiscale.
against tax
Nous
fraud and tax
proposerons
evasion.
un projet
We
de loi ciblant
are going
les
to
profits
propose
dissimulés
a legal act
derrière
to
des sociétés
try to
écrans.
get at the
Et nous mettrons
profits
tout en
hidden
œuvre
behind
pour sceller
false
l'accord mondial
companies,
historique sur le
store
taux minimal
companies,
d'impôt
and we
sur
want
les
to
sociétés.
mobilize efforts to
Payer
achieve a
un
worldwide
juste
minimum
montant d'impôt
corporate
n'est
tax.
pas seulement une
To pay
question
a
de
fair amount of
finances
tax
publiques,
is not just a
mais
question of
surtout
ensuring
une
proper public
simple
finances,
question
but it is
d'équité.
quite simply a question of fairness and
Mesdames et messieurs
justice.
les députés,
Ladies and
nous
gentlemen,
avons tous profité des fondements de notre économie
we have
européenne
all
sociale
benefited
de
from
marché.
the
Et nous
foundations of our
devons faire
European
en
social
sorte
market
que la
economy.
prochaine génération
And therefore, we have to
puisse
ensure that the
construire
next
leur
generation can also
Nous
build
sommes
on
en
those
présence
foundations,
d'une jeune
their
génération
future.
hautement éduquée,
We have a highly educated young generation, a highly talented younger generation, and one
une
full of
génération qui a
motivation.
tellement
We have a generation, a new generation that has had to sacrifice so much in order to protect
La
the
jeunesse,
safety of
c'est
others.
normalement le moment de la découverte.
Usually,
On fait de
when you're
nouvelles
young, it's the time
expériences.
to
On trouve
expand your
des amis de
horizons,
vie.
make new
On découvre
experiences,
son
make
propre
friends for
chemin.
life, find
Mais
your
qu'est-ce qu'on a
path in
demandé aux
life.
jeunes
But
aujourd'hui?
what have we been asking?
De
What are we
garder les
asking of young
distances
people
sociales.
today? We are asking them
De
to
rester
observe social
confinés.
distancing measures. We are asking
Et de
them to
faire
stay at home,
l'école à la maison
to study
pendant
at home,
plus d'un an.
and we've asked them to do this for more
C'est
than a
ainsi
year.
que tout ce que nous faisons
So
du
that's
pacte
why
vert
everything
à
that we're
Next
doing,
Generation
the Green
vise à protéger
Deal,
leur
Next
avenir.
Generation EU, aims to
C'est aussi
protect
pourquoi
the
Next
future of those young
Generation EU
people.
doit être
That is why the
financée
next generation
par des nouvelles
must
ressources propres
be
sur lesquelles
funded
nous
by
travaillons.
new own resources, which we are working on at the moment.
Mais nous devons également
But we
veiller à ne
also
pas
have to
créer de
ensure that we
nouvelles
don't
failles,
create
parce que
new
l'Europe a
rifts,
besoin de toute
because
sa jeunesse
Europe needs all its young people. We have to encourage those who are falling through the gaps in the net, those people who do not have a job, those people who are neither in education or training. For those young people, we want to offer a new program, ALMA. ALMA will offer young people the possibility to get some temporary work experience in another member state, because they too have the right to have an experience like Erasmus, to gain skills and experience, to create links and to forge a new European identity. But if we want to redesign our union in their image, young people also should be able to shape the future of Europe. Europe should have a soul and a vision that speaks to those young people, as Jacques Delors called for when he said, how can we build Europe if young people do not see it as a collective project, as a project that reflects their future? And this is why we will propose to make 2022 the year of European youth. Let's have a year devoted to putting the spotlight on these young people who have given up so much to others. And young people should be leading the debate in the conference on the future of Europe, because it's their future and it should be their conference. And as we have said at the beginning of our mandate, the Commission is ready to follow through on points decided by the conference.
Honourable members, this is a generation with a conscience. They are pushing us to go further and faster to tackle the climate crisis. And the events of the summer only served to explain why. We saw floods in Belgium and Germany, and wildfires burning from Greece to the hills in France. And if we don't believe our own eyes, we only have to follow the science. The United Nations recently published an IPCC report, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. It is the authority on the science of climate change. The report leaves no doubt. Climate change is only man-made. But since it is man-made, we can do something about it. As I heard it say, it's warming, it's us. We're sure it's bad, but we can fix it. And change is already happening. More electric vehicles than diesel cars were registered in Germany in the first half of this year. Poland is now the EU's largest exporter of batteries and electric buses. Or take the new European Bauhaus that led to an explosion of creativity of architects, designers, engineers across our union. And if the European Green Deal has a soul, then it is the new European Bauhaus. So clearly something is on the move. And this is what the European Green Deal is all about. In my speech last year, I announced our target of at least 55% emission reduction by 2030. Since then, we have together turned our climate goals into legal obligations. And we are the first major economy to present comprehensive legislation in order to get it done. You've seen the complexity of the detail, but the goal is simple. We will put a price on pollution. We will clean the energy we use. We will have smarter cars and cleaner airplanes, and we will make sure that higher climate ambition comes with more social ambition, because this must be a fair green transition. And this is why we proposed a new social climate fund to tackle the energy poverty that already 34 million Europeans suffer from. So I count on both Parliament and Member States to keep the package and to keep the ambition together. When it comes to climate change and the nature crisis, Europe can do a lot, and it will support others. I am proud to announce today that the European Union will double its external funding for biodiversity, in particular for the most vulnerable countries. But Europe cannot do it alone. The COP26 in Glasgow will be a moment of truth for the global community. Major economies, from the US to Japan, have set ambitions for climate neutrality in 2050 or shortly after. That's good. But they need now to be backed up by concrete plans in time for Glasgow, because current commitments for 2030 will not keep global warming at 1.5 Celsius within reach. Every country has a responsibility. The goals that President Xi has set out for China are encouraging, but we call for that same leadership on setting out how China will get there. The world would be relieved if they showed they could peak emissions by mid-decade and move away from coal at home and abroad. But while every country has a responsibility, major economies like us do have a special duty to the least developed and the most vulnerable countries. The so-called climate finance is essential for them, both for mitigation and adaptation. In Mexico and in Paris, the major economies committed to provide $100 billion a year until 2025 to the least developed and most vulnerable countries. We deliver on our commitments. Team Europe contributes $25 billion a year, but others still leave a gaping hole towards reaching the global target. So closing that gap will increase the chance of success in Glasgow. My message today is that Europe is ready to do more. We will now propose an additional €4 billion for climate finance until 2027. But we expect the United States and our partners to step up too. This is vital because closing the climate finance gap together, the US and the European Union, would be such a strong signal for global climate leadership, and it is time to deliver now. We have no time to wait anymore. Honourable members, this climate and economic leadership is central to Europe's global and security objectives. It also reflects a wider shift in world affairs at a time of transition towards a new international order. We are entering a new era of hyper-competitiveness, an era in which some stop at nothing to gain influence, from vaccine promises to high-interest loans, from missiles to misinformation. An era of regional rivalries and major powers refocusing their attention towards each other. Recent events in Afghanistan are not the cause of this change, but they are a symptom of it. And first and foremost, I want to be clear. We stand by the Afghan people. We stand by the Afghan people, the women and children, prosecutors, journalists, and human rights defenders. I think in particular of women judges who are now in hiding from the men they jailed. They have been put at risk for their contribution to justice and the rule of law. We must support them, and we will coordinate all efforts with member states to bring them to safety. And we must continue supporting all Afghans in the country and in neighbouring countries. We must do everything to avert the real risk that is out there of a major famine and a humanitarian disaster. And we will do our part. We will increase again humanitarian aid for Afghanistan by €100 million. This will be part of a new, wider Afghan support package that we will present in the next weeks to combine all our efforts. Honourable members, witnessing events unfold in Afghanistan was profoundly painful for the families and friends of fallen servicemen and servicewomen. We bow to the sacrifice of those soldiers, diplomats, and aid workers who laid down their lives for our common cause. To make sure that their service will never be in vain, we have to reflect on how this mission could end so abruptly. They are deeply troubling questions that allies will have to tackle within NATO. But there is simply no security and defence issue where less cooperation is the answer. So we need to invest in our joint partnership and draw on each side's unique strength. And this is why we are working with Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg on a new EU-NATO joint declaration to be presented before the end of the year. But this is only one part of the equation. Europe can, and clearly should, be able and willing to do more on its own. But if we are to do more, we first need to explain why. I see three broad categories. First, we need to provide stability in our neighbourhood and across different regions. We are connected to the world by narrow straits, stormy seas, and vast land borders. And because of that geography, Europe knows better than anyone else that if you don't deal in time with the crisis abroad, this crisis will come to you. Secondly, the nature of the threats we face is evolving rapidly, from hybrid to cyber attacks to the growing arms race in space. We see that disruptive technology has been the great equalizer in the way power can be used today by rogue states and non-state groups. You no longer need an army or missile to cause mass damage. You can paralyze industrial plants, city administrations, and hospitals. All you need is your laptop. You can disrupt entire elections with a smartphone and an internet connection. And the third reason is that our European Union is a unique security provider. There will be missions where NATO or the United Nations will not be present, but where Europe should be. On the ground, our soldiers work side by side with police officers, lawyers and doctors, with humanitarian workers and human rights defenders, with teachers and engineers. We can combine military and civilian alongside with diplomatic and development. And we have a long history in building and protecting peace. The good news is that over the past years we have started to develop kind of a European defence ecosystem. But what we need now is the European Defence Union. In the last weeks, there have been many discussions on expeditionary forces, on what type and how many we need, battle groups and EU entry forces. This is no doubt part of the debate, and I think it will be part of the solution. But the more fundamental issue is why this has not worked in the past. You can have the most advanced forces in the world, but if you're never prepared to use them, of what use are they? What has held us back until now is not just a shortfall of capacity, it is the lack of political will. And if we develop this political will, there's a lot that we can do at EU level. Allow me to give you three concrete examples. First, we need to build a foundation for collective decision-making, and this is what I call situational awareness. We fall short if member states active in the same reason do not share their information at the EU level. It is vital that we improve intelligence cooperation, but this is not just about intelligence in the narrow sense. It is about bringing together the knowledge from all services and all sources, from space to police trainers, from open source to development agencies. The European Union could have a unique scope and depth of knowledge. It's out there. But we can only use that information and make decisions if we have the full picture. And this is currently not the case. We have the knowledge, but it is disjoint. We have the information, but it is fragmented. And this is why the European Union could consider its own joint situational awareness centre to fuse all of these different pieces of information and to be better prepared, to be fully informed, and thus to be able to decide. Secondly, we need to improve interoperability. This is why we're already investing in common European platforms, from fighter jets to drones and cybers. You know that. But we have to keep thinking of new ways to use all the possible synergies. One example could be to consider waiving value-added tax, the VAT, when buying defence equipment developed and produced in Europe. This would not only increase our interoperability, but it would also decrease our dependencies of today. And the third point is, we cannot talk about defence without talking about cyber. If everything is connected, everything can be hacked. And given that resources are scarce, we have to bundle our forces. And we should not just be satisfied to address the cyber threat, but also strive to become a leader in cybersecurity. It should be here in Europe where cyber defence tools are developed. And this is why we need a European cyber defence policy, including legislation on common standards under a new European Cyber Resilience Act. So, we can do a lot at EU level. But member states need to do more too. And this starts with a common assessment of the threats we face and a common approach to dealing with them. The upcoming strategic compass is the key process to this discussion. And we need to decide how we can use all the possibilities that are already in the treaty. And this is why, under the French presidency, President Macron and I will convene a summit on European defence. Honourable members, it is time for Europe to step up to the next level. In a more contested world, protecting our interests is not only about defending ourselves. It is also about forging strong and reliable partnerships. This is not a luxury. It is essential for our future stability, security and prosperity. And this work starts by deepening our partnership with our closest allies. With the United States, we will develop our new agenda for global change, from the new Tech and Technology Council to health security and sustainability. The European Union and the United States will always be stronger together. And of course, the same goes for our neighbours in the Western Balkans. Before the end of the month, I will travel to the region to send a strong signal of our commitment to the accession process. We owe it to all those young people who believe in a future in Europe. And this is why we're ramping up our support through our new investment and economic plan, with around a third of the region's GDP. Because, honourable members, investment in the future of the Western Balkans is an investment in the future of the European Union. And we will also continue investing in our partnership in our neighbourhood, from stepping up our engagement in the Eastern Partnership to implementing the new agenda of the Mediterranean, and continuing to work on the different aspects of our relationship to Turkey. Honourable members, if Europe is to become a more global player, it also needs to focus on the next generation of partnerships. In this spirit, today's new EU Indo-Pacific strategy is a milestone. It reflects the growing importance of the region to our prosperity and our security, but it also reflects the fact that autocratic regimes use it to try to expand their influence. Europe needs to be more active and to be more present in the region. So, we will work together to deepen trade links, strengthen global supply chains, and develop new investment projects on the green and digital technologies. This is a template for how Europe can redesign its model to connect the world. We're pretty good at financing roads, but it does not make any sense for Europe if we build a perfect road between a copper that is Chinese copper mine that is Chinese-owned and a harbour that is Chinese-owned. So we have to get smarter when it comes to these kind of investment. And this is why we will soon present our new connectivity strategy called Global Gateway. We will build global gateway partnerships with countries around the world. We want investment in quality infrastructure, connecting people, goods and services around the world. We will take a values-based approach, offering transparency and good governance to our partners. We want to create links and not dependencies. And we know that this can work. Since the summer, the new underwater fibre optic cable has connected Brazil to Portugal. We will invest with Africa to create a market for green hydrogen that connects the two shores of the Mediterranean. We need a team global approach to make Global Gateway happen. We will connect institutions and investment banks and business community, and we will make this a priority for regional summits, starting with the next EU-Africa summit in February. We want to turn Global Gateway into a trusted brand around the world. And let me be very clear about one more point. Doing business around the world is good. Global trade around the world, that is good and necessary. But this can never, ever be done at the expense of people's dignity and freedom. Today, there are around 25 million people out there who are threatened or coerced into forced labor. We can never accept that they are forced to make products and that these products then end up for sale here in shops in Europe. So we will propose a ban on products on our market that have been made by forced labor, because human rights are not for sale at any price. And, honourable members, human beings are not bargaining chips. Look at what happened at our borders with Belarus. The regime in Minsk has instrumentalised human beings. They have put people on planes and literally pushed them towards Europe's border. This can never be tolerated. And the quick European reaction shows that. And rest assured, we will continue to stand together with Lithuania, Latvia and Poland, and let's call it what it is. It is a hybrid attack to destabilise Europe. We'll never tolerate that. These are not isolated events. We saw similar incidents at other borders, and we can expect to see it again. And this is why, as part of our work on Schengen, we will set out new ways to respond to such aggression and ensure unity in protecting our external borders. But as long as we do not find common ground on how to manage migration, our opponents will continue to target this. Meanwhile, human traffickers continue to exploit people through deadly routes across the Mediterranean. And these events show us that every country has a stake in building a European migration system. The new Pact on Migration and Asylum gives us everything we need to manage the different types of situations we face. All the elements are there. This is a balanced and humane system that works for all member states in all circumstances. We know that we can find common ground. But in the years since the Commission presented the Pact, progress has been painfully slow. And I think this is the moment now for a European migration management policy. So I urge this House and the Member States to speed up the process. This ultimately comes down to a question of trust. Trust between Member States, trust for Europeans that migration can be managed, trust that Europe will always live up to its enduring duty to the most vulnerable and most in need. I know that there are many strongly held views on migration in Europe, but I believe the common ground is not so far away. Because if you ask most Europeans, they would agree that we should act to curb irregular migration, but they would also agree that we have to act to provide a refuge to those forced to flee. They would agree that we should return those who have no right to stay. But they would also agree that we should welcome those who come here legally and make such a vital contribution to our society and our economies. And we should all agree that the topic of migration should never be used to divide us. I am convinced that there is a way that Europe can build trust amongst us when it comes to migration. Meine Damen und Herren Abgeordnete.
Honourable members. Societies that are based on democracy and common values are based on solid foundations. They believe in people, and this makes it possible for new ideas to emerge and to bring about change, to overcome injustice. Trust based on these common values is what brought our founding fathers and mothers together after the Second World War. And it's precisely these values that brought together freedom fighters who tore down the Iron Curtain more than 30 years ago. They wanted democracy. They wanted to freely choose and vote for their governments. They wanted the rule of law. They wanted everyone to be equal before the law. They wanted to put an end to state espionage and spying and combat corruption. They wanted the freedom to be different from the majority, or as Václav Havel so beautifully put it, they wanted all of these wonderful, fantastic European values. This is all part of the humanitarian and religious heritage of Europe. It's part of what we are. And these values are now enshrined in our European treaties. All of us have committed ourselves to respecting these. When we became part of the European Union as free sovereign states, we undertook to defend these values, and we will never fail in this determination. Our values are guaranteed by our legal order, and the judgments of the European Court of Justice protect and safeguard these. And these rulings, these judgments are binding, and we will pay attention to these judgments being observed in every single member state of our union. Because the protection of the rule of law is not just a wonderful aim, it's daily hard work and daily attempts at improvement. And this is all what we are striving for in Europe. And one example of this are the judicial reforms going on in Malta and the attempts to deal with corruption in Slovakia. And as of 2022, the reports on the rule of law will increasingly include specific and concrete recommendations to member state governments. Nevertheless, there is cause for concern in some member states, and one thing is very important to me in this connection. Dialogue always comes first. But dialogue is not an end in itself. It has to lead to something. And therefore, we are following a two-pronged approach based on dialogue and determined action. And this is what we did last week. And we will continue to do this. Because the right to an independent judiciary, the right for equal treatment for all before the law, these are rights that people have to be able to rely on throughout Europe, and independently of whether they belong to a majority or a minority. That is the soul of Europe, and this is what we have to defend. And ladies and gentlemen, honourable members, the European budget is the future of the European Union expressed in figures, and it too has to be safeguarded. We need to ensure that every euro, every cent is spent as intended and on a legal basis, respecting the rule of law. Investments that are going to benefit our children in the future must not disappear into shadowy channels. Corruption doesn't just mean stealing from the taxpayer. Corruption doesn't just mean putting off investors, deterring investment. Corruption means that people with lots of money can buy all sorts of favours, and that democratic rules and principles can be undermined. And when it comes to protecting our budget, we will follow up every case with everything in our power, and we're going to get going on this without further ado. Ladies and gentlemen, if we wish to defend our values, well, when we defend our values, we are defending our freedom. The freedom to be who you are. The freedom to say what is in your head, what you are thinking about. The freedom to love who you want. But freedom also means freedom from fear. During the pandemic, too many women were robbed of this freedom. It must have been a particularly appalling time for people who could not hide anywhere, who couldn't flee from their torturers. So we need to shed some light in these dark corners. We have to find ways out of this suffering. People who abuse women have to be brought before the law, and these women have to be able to live freely in confidence. So by the end of the year, we will come forward with an act to fight violence against women. We're talking about effective criminal law rules and law enforcement. It's about everybody's dignity and the right to justice, which is part of Europe's soul that we will fight for. Honourable members, finally, let us look at one particular freedom that brings together all others, or that gives a voice to all others, and that is freedom of the media. Journalists are coming under attack simply because they are doing their jobs. Some are threatened, intimidated, or beaten up. Others tragically murdered. In our European Union, I'd like to name some names. Daphne Caruana Galizia, Jan Kuciak, Peter de Vries. Their stories may differ in the detail, but they have one thing in common. They stood up and fought for our right to information, and that's what they died for. Information is a public good. We have to protect those people who are creating transparency, and that is our journalists. And this is why today we are coming forward with a recommendation on better protection of journalists, and we have to put a stop to those people who are threatening freedom of the media. media companies are not just any old company. Their independence is essential, and this is why Europe needs a law that secures that protection, and the Media Protection Act will do that, because if we are defending the media, we are also defending our democracy.
Honourable members, strengthening Schumann's European ideal that I invoked earlier is a continuous work. And we should not hide away from our inconsistencies and imperfections. But imperfect as we might be, our union is both beautifully unique and uniquely beautiful. It is a union where we strengthen our individual liberty through the strength of our community. A union shaped as much by our shared history and values as by our different cultures and perspectives. It is a union with a soul. Trying to find the right words to capture the essence of this feeling is not easy. But it is easier when you borrow them from someone who inspires you. And this is why I have invited a guest of honor to be with us today. Many of you might know her, a gold medalist from Italy who captured my heart this summer. But what you might not know is that only in April she was told her life was in peril. She went through surgery. She fought back. She recovered. And only 119 days after she left the hospital, she won Paralympic gold. Honourable members, please join me in welcoming Bebe Vio. Please stand up. Bebe has overcome so much, so young. Her story is one of rising against all odds, of succeeding thanks to talent, tenacity, and unrelenting positivity. She is the image of her generation, a leader and advocate for the causes she believes in. And she has managed to achieve all of that by living up to her belief that if it seems impossible, then it can be done. Se sembra impossibile, allora si può fare.
Well, believe yourself, then you can do it.
And this was the spirit of our European founders, and this is the spirit of Europe's next generation. So let's be inspired by Bebe and by all the young people who change our perception of the possible, who show us that you can be what you want to be and that you can achieve whatever you believe in. Honourable members, that is the soul of Europe. That is the future of Europe. Let's make it stronger. Viva l'Europa!